Quest for Glory's title screen lets you know what sort of game this is going to be right away. Kind of a silly one. Upon a tree that sits aside the road into a small village is posted a declaration that states, "Wanted, hero for the village of Spielberg." The entire game is a bit quirky in terms of the writing and characters. I love it for that. There's nothing out there quite like Quest for Glory, and while many people look fondly back upon the King's Quest titles as their favorite old-school point-and-click adventure, the Quest for Glory series is absolutely mine. While I did play King's Quest titles around the same time I was getting into Quest for Glory, they didn't hook me like Quest for Glory did, though I did enjoy them. The words, "Alexander examines the strange etchings in the face of the cliff," will forever be etched into my brain. While King's Quest offered colorful worlds, interesting stories, and solid point-and-click gameplay, Quest for Glory offered something beyond that. RPG-style mechanics, as well as combat. For whatever reason, these features are what really sunk their hooks into me the first time I played on that quiet night at my friend's house. I'll never forget that night for more than one reason. We were at his father's house, up late on the weekend playing Nintendo 64 games. I took a break while he played Shadows of the Empire, a single-player game, and was messing around on his old computer. At some point, I stumbled upon Quest for Glory and asked him about it, at which point he told me to fire it up and take a look. I was immediately entranced with the world of Quest for Glory and the town of Spielberg. Another factor which made those nights impossible to forget, his father's house was situated next to a pond, and it was a two-story home, but the lower story was split with an open area between for vehicles. Late at night, if we wanted a drink, we had to walk out onto a sort of pier on the side of the home where the downstairs refrigerator was. So always within a couple of feet were the dark waters of the pond. The reason this is relevant is that his father also had a pet alligator. I say pet, but it was just an alligator that inhabited the pond, which he would feed frequently by throwing large chunks of raw meat. Every time I went to get a Dr. Pepper, with my legs just 1 or 2 feet away from those dark waters, I always had great anxiety that I would end up being featured in my very own Sierra death message. Fortunately, that never happened, and I always made it back to the town of Spielberg without fail. Quest for Glory was easy to get into, as I had previously played King's Quest VI on a friend's Windows 3.1 computer as well. In fact, King's Quest VI was often something we beat our heads against trying to progress further into the game. One should be reminded that this was the mid to late 90s, and there was no internet as existed today. GameFAQs had just been created in its most rudimentary form, but it would be a few years before I would even become aware of it. And there was certainly no YouTube to look up playthroughs or anything of that nature. Regardless, for the rest of that night, I was absolutely hooked on Quest for Glory, and I found that there were 3 more games in the series to boot. I didn't try them out that night, but I would, eventually. It was long after that I acquired my very own Quest for Glory collection, which included a demo for the upcoming game, Quest for Glory 5 Dragonfire. Of course, I played through all of the games on the collection excitedly, and even tried out the demo for Dragonfire, becoming hyped for a brand new game in the series on the horizon. But those are tales for later. Let's focus in on Quest for Glory, So You Want to Be a Hero, and from whence it came. Quest for Glory, as a series, is the brainchild of husband and wife team, Corey and Lori Cole. The Coles joined Sierra sometime in the mid-80s. Corey was known to be working as a programmer, initially porting titles like King's Quest IV and Space Quest III to the Atari ST. Lori seemingly joined up after being impressed with Roberta Williams' King's Quest series. She became the lead designer and writer for an original project, Heroes Quest, which would later be renamed to Quest for Glory due to trademark issues with the board game maker Hasbro. Though for the purposes of this video, I'll be referring to the title as Quest for Glory for the remainder of the runtime. Sierra, by the time Quest for Glory launched, had become a juggernaut of the point-and-click adventure genre and was likely in the top 5 PC game developers of that period. The growth for Sierra seemed exponential at that time, starting as a small team in the early 80s and ballooning into over 300 employees by the time Quest for Glory released. Many of the titles released in this decade did so to critical acclaim and exceedingly high sales. Laurie Cole wanted to create something in the vein of King's Quest, but with her own spin. She solicited Sierra with her concept for Quest for Glory once her child was old enough to stay in daycare for a few hours while she worked in-house at Sierra. Being an avid D&D player, Laurie attempted to design a game with multiple solutions to puzzles as well as multiple classes. Beyond allowing the series to stand out from other point-and-click titles of the era, this provided opportunities for role-playing as well as replayability, and leads directly into the first thing the player must do upon starting a new game: creating a character. Once the player chooses to start the game, they are treated to a statuesque stage platform, which features 3 figures, which each animate in sequence: the fighter, the magic user, and the thief. A fighter is meant to handle situations in a more head-on fashion and is unlikely to avoid combat encounters. The magic user is an experienced caster with the ability to circumvent many situations or solve puzzles with magical solutions. The thief is a stealthy and sneaky sort, able to stealth past encounters or use agile solutions in order to resolve situations. One thing I will note about this class system: choosing one of these classes does not lock you into certain puzzle solutions in most cases. Many puzzles within the game can still be resolved using methods other than what is intended for your class, depending on what skills and items you have available to you. I really enjoy this about Quest for Glory, as it means you can create a hybrid sort of class, and we'll go over more of that in just a moment. However, it is worth noting that choosing a class may lock you into certain encounters. In other words, a thief may have access to certain encounters that a fighter will not, and vice versa. Once you choose your class, you're brought to the statistic and skill screen. Here you can name your character whatever you like and allocate a total of 50 points to your character. These must be divided among skills and stats. Depending on which class you choose, you'll observe that some skills start at 0. This means they will never be usable. However, while adding to a skill you already are proficient in is done in increments of 5, if you attempt to add points to a skill that's at 0, you can do that. It will just cost 15 points to learn the skill. So you could make a hybrid sort of character, like a thief with magic or a stealthy magic user. A thief is capable of having every skill in the game if you so choose. They just won't start at a very high level in any of them. The thief is my favorite class when playing a hybrid for this reason. You have 5 primary stats: strength, intelligence, agility, vitality, and luck. The remainder are all skills. As you play through the game and use skills or perform actions that may impact stats, you will gain in those statistics or skills. Climbing a tree or other structures repeatedly will lead to gains in both climbing, strength, and vitality. Combat encounters could lead to gains in weapon use, dodge, parry, strength, agility, and vitality. In most cases, if it makes sense that it would affect it, it probably does. This is one of those magical components of Quest for Glory that makes the game feel so good: intuitive and relatable character progression. We'll briefly go over each of the skills and stats in some detail so that you have a more direct idea of what they do or how they impact the player. Much of it is intuitive, but it's helpful to know the details. Strength determines how hard you strike in combat, how much health you have, and how much you are able to carry. Intelligence determines the effectiveness of spells and how much mana is available to you. Agility determines quickness in combat, how well a thief performs his related skills, and is also factored into the total stamina pool. Vitality determines defense and factors into health points as well as stamina. Luck allegedly affects a large amount of functions, but on a relatively low level, as is common for the stat in many titles. As far as the skills, magic, along with intelligence, determines the effectiveness of your arsenal of spells as well as factors into your mana pool total. Weapon use determines how much damage you do with a weapon. This is factored with strength for the final determination. In addition, it factors into hit chance while in combat. Parry, as expected, determines skill use with a shield while engaged in a fight. Dodge works similarly to parry in that it determines how effective your dodging will be when in combat. Stealth allows the hero to use the sneaking ability. This is a movement style or stance in which a player can move stealthily and in some cases avoid combat encounters as well. Lockpicking determines the difficulty of locks the hero can pick. Throwing affects how often you will hit a target and how much damage you will do when throwing items, such as rocks or daggers. Finally, climbing allows the hero to scale town walls, cliffs, trees, and other such vertical challenges. That covers the skills available to the player, and each class will start with certain allocations to each skill, depending on which class is chosen. The Thief, for example, will start with lockpicking and stealth, whereas the Mage will begin with magic, and so on. Remember, if you start the game with 0 in any given skill, you will never be able to use it, regardless of how many times you try. It must be above 0 to gain in the future. Once you make your decision on a class and divvy up your available skill points, it's time to start the adventure. Today, we'll be covering and focusing on the VGA, mouse-based remake of Quest for Glory, though the original was an EGA title with a parser interface. Don't worry, we'll dive deeper into those aspects when Quest for Glory 2 coverage comes along. But for now, we're focused on the VGA remake. As a side note, this visually enhanced version was released in 1992, a few years after the original EGA title launched. Before we begin the game proper, some brief backstory is essential to understand the motivations of our character. The hero is a recent graduate of the famous adventurer's Correspondence School for Heroes. Our hero responded to an ad that went something along the lines, "Wanted, hero, no experience necessary. Visit beautiful Spielberg, fight monsters, defeat brigands, rewards and the title Hero of Spielberg to the successful applicant." After a month's journey over perilous and unknown terrain, the hero arrives at his destination and our story begins. The hero finds himself walking into the town gates of the small village of Spielberg. He is immediately greeted by the sheriff, Schultz Meisterson, and his assistant, Otto von Goon. He welcomes us to the town and speaks of how lucky we are to even have made it down the mountain pass, as the snow has blocked it completely. Apparently, the weather has trapped a great deal of monsters in the valley, and brigands are on the loose in the area. Wishing us good luck on our quest, he refocuses on his pipe and continues enjoying the beautiful morning. Left to our own devices, my preferred stop is the Adventurers Guild Hall. Heading west of the sheriff's office, we pass by the Hero's Tale Inn, which we'll visit in detail later, to find a few buildings in this corner of Spielberg. Inside the guild hall, it's decorated by all sorts of mounted creatures, ranging from a moose, a saurus, a dragon, and even the dreadful Antwerp. One of the best features in these sorts of games are the vivid and often funny descriptions the player can experience in the world, and this is a great time to talk about the interface. The point-and-click interface is fairly simple in its design. The cursor is moved with the mouse, and a right click changes what action you're going to perform, and the left click causes you to engage in that action. The actions you can cycle through are, from left to right, move, look, grab, speak, and use inventory item. If you hover the mouse to the top of the screen, you'll see independent icons representing each of those actions, as well as more icons. Again, from left to right, the swirling star determines other actions you can perform or toggle. For example, in that submenu you can change walk to run or to sneak, as well as view your stats or take some time to rest. As mentioned, this is a toggle. Therefore, if you change to sneak or run, you'll henceforth be doing that as your standard movement option until either changed or a game condition changes it for you. The final and more formal-looking star accesses your magical spellbook, which we will speak more of later. The next icon is empty to start the game, but becomes whatever you currently have selected from your inventory, and will illustrate that item in the black box. Selecting an item in the inventory will add it to the right-click cycle mentioned earlier, so you can have it ready to go at a given time with just a few clicks. The next icon, the backpack, opens the hero's inventory and allows you to examine items within it or determine your current weight versus capacity. The icon with the gear beyond that takes you to a submenu in which you can save your game, restore your game, adjust game speed, quit, etc. The final icon, the question mark, is the help menu. The system is simple but elegant, allowing for many different ways to interact with the environment. While some complained at the removal of the aforementioned parser interface, which was utilized by typing commands such as look at dragon into a text box, the ease of use creates a condition for greater mass appeal. As I said though, we'll talk more about the parser interface, which I do love, in detail when we get to Quest for Glory 2, Trial by Fire, in the future. Personally, I don't necessarily favor one over the other. I love both. I also enjoy the few situations in which I've been presented with a hybrid system that allows both. But Quest for Glory is only one or the other. EGA is parser and VGA is mouse interface. Notably, when Tierra/AGDI remade Quest for Glory 2 Trial by Fire some years ago, they allow players to choose between parser, mouse-based, or a combination of both, which I found to be very delightful. As stated, we'll cover that in some detail when it's time to tackle Quest for Glory 2. In addition to the mounted trophies upon the wall, we can see what looks to be the Guildmaster sleeping in a chair while holding his sword. There are a lot of things we can do in this building right away. We can spend some time admiring the mounted heads, including the sometimes humorous descriptions we can receive by looking at them. We can take a look at the quest board near the fireplace to see what sort of tasks the people of the village are seeking help with, sign the adventurer's logbook, or speak with the Guildmaster to learn what he knows. If we are able to rouse him from his slumber, that is. Of course, we have to sign the logbook. That's a Quest for Glory essential activity. Each game features such a logbook somewhere in the game for the hero to leave his sign on the land. If we look at the logbook, we can see that the last entry was 5 years prior by Bernard von Spielberg, and we'll come back to that tidbit in just a moment. Taking a look at the quest board, we can see there's an awful lot of requests going unfilled at this adventurer's guild. The local healer has lost her ring. Elsa von Spielberg, the daughter of the Baron, has gone missing, and a reward is available for her safe return. A bounty is on the head of the Brigand warlock, known to be roaming the lands, as well as a bounty on the Brigand leader. The final entry on the board speaks of the missing Baronet, Bernard von Spielberg. Thinking back to the logbook, this means the Baronet has been missing for 5 years, and not a single adventurer has come to Spielberg. Or if they haven't signed the logbook, and that would be a truly unacceptable action by any hero worth their salt, so we can therefore conclude that none have come. If we talk to the Guildmaster, he'll tell us his name is Wolfgang, and he has a lot to speak about. The VGA version of this game features a basic, graphical conversation tree. Choosing a topic will ask the NPC about that topic, and they will give some manner of reply. Sometimes, topics will open further subtopics that can be explored via conversation. He will speak of adventures in days long past with the Baron and the Sheriff, and also speak of a curse that has befallen the land due to the arrival of an evil witch, Baba Yaga. As with most NPCs in the game, there's quite a lot to learn about from simple conversation, and you'll be doing a lot of it in this game. Having learned quite a bit, we can head back out of the guild. If we're magically inclined, it's not a bad time to visit Zara Shashina in her nearby magic shop. Zara is a sorceress that hails from the eastern woods, which are paradoxically west of Spielberg proper. Upon entering the shop, she will enter in quite a bombastic manner, appearing magically toward the center rear of her shop. If you're so inclined, you can purchase a few spells from her, and even a few potions. If asked, she will also speak about an initiation for magic users to become official wizards, though the criteria are quite high. The hero must have mastered 9 spells and have the power to cast all of them in sequence, and have proven himself worthy by accomplishing a great deed. Only then can he undergo initiation to become a full wizard. Further, she states that there is a place in the distant south where you must journey, but before considering that, you must become a hero here. Zara is alluding to the Wizard Institute of Technocery, something we'll most definitely speak about when we get to Quest for Glory 2, but it's a fun tidbit that it's mentioned here. There are a great many things that recur throughout the games or are referenced and returned to within the series, and it's great. Passing by the old woman in the rocking chair, we can head back the way we came. Beyond the Sheriff and Otto is yet another path that wraps around toward the back of the town. Here we can find 2 main points of interest. The first is a fruit and vegetable stall run by a centaur named Hildy. The hero is able to buy both apples and vegetables here for quite an affordable price as an alternative to rations and for other purposes. Right next to her stall is the dry goods store. This is a sort of general store that sells a variety of basic goods. The shopkeeper is a bookworm sort of fellow, and his face is buried deep within a book when you enter, looking up in a surprised fashion as you approach. He makes a comment about how very few adventurers are seen around these parts anymore, as the brigands get most of them before they even make it to town. The wares he offers consists of empty flasks, which are always useful, basic rations, daggers, and chainmail armor. While the first 3 items are very basic and fairly cheap, the chainmail armor is a whopping 500 silvers, and is something you might consider much later on in the game once your purse has found itself to be fattened from adventuring. Heading out of the shop and further down the winding path, we arrive at the back end of the town. Here there are 2 further points of interest, one of which is an alleyway and the other a tavern. For now, we're going to head down the alleyway and check out the tavern later on. Turning into the alleyway, we can see a beggar on the floor asking for coins. You can choose to interact with him or not, but more importantly, there is a wall in the rear that's climbable. This serves as an alternative exit to the town, though you cannot return into town from the other side for whatever reason. After trying, and no doubt failing a few times, the hero can make his way over the wall and end up in what appears to be a garden with another centaur tending to it. His name is Heinrich, and it turns out he's the father of Hildy, the one operating the produce stall. Apparently, this is where all of the produce sold at the stall is grown. Heading to the east, the hero will find a lone hut as well as a road to what seems to be a castle. Additionally, there's a small red bird that has nested in a tree limb above the roadway. If you're eagle-eyed, you might notice something flashing in the nest beneath the bird. While there is more than one way to resolve this problem of an out-of-reach item, we're going to climb the tree. Climbing up, we can grab it, and it turns out it's a golden ring. Picking up the ring, we head into the lone hut to see what's inside. An older woman stands pointedly stirring one of several cauldrons. This is the town healer, and the smells of various ingredients drift through the air. Various sorts of herbs can be observed hanging, and many bottles line the shelves. She offers a variety of these potions available for sale, and of note is that she will also purchase trophy items from enemy creatures. For example, the cheetars that can be encountered at night can be declawed, and the claws can be sold to the healer for gold. Remembering the lost item posting on the quest board, the hero offers over the golden ring that he found outside. The bird above her head doesn't go amiss. It likely takes things from the shopkeeper often. She hands over some gold and healing potions as a reward, and then gives us a big kiss as the hero tries desperately to escape. After being rushed out, it's a great idea to return in order to buy some stamina potions. In this game particularly, if you hit 0 stamina, your hero dies. So always stay well rested or keep a stamina potion in hand for emergencies. You don't want to die of exhaustion out in the forest near Spielberg, as the stamina bar is one of the most dangerous enemies in the game. Heading on from the healer, if you take the winding path toward the castle, we will be met with a gate guard. If you ask, he'll let you in and out through the gate depending on where you are. Inside the castle, we can find a man practicing his swordsmanship, and he's available for training if the hero is willing to pay. This is a great way to practice your combat skills without the threat of death, stamina-induced incidents aside. Otherwise, there's a stable to the east that features work available for the hero. If he's willing, he can rake the stables and earn a solid 5 silver, potentially increasing some stats along the way. You may perform this task for pay only once a day. It's often something I like to do shortly after waking up to a new day, simply for the stat training and extra spending money early on. This is one aspect that really drew me into Quest for Glory's world. Something as simple as this stable hand offering the work daily. I like that in Spielberg, you could live, so to speak. Enemies to fight, stats to raise, money to earn through various means, a day and night cycle, and places to sleep. My imagination was easily sparked when I first played, and at times played this similar to an open world game that would come out much later, like Morrowind. As mentioned before, though I liked adventure games, the systems in place within Quest for Glory as a series brought it to a new level for me. Though I'll say that this experience is not exactly congruent across all titles in the series. For whatever reason, I feel that the first game captures this feeling the best out of all of them. The second game was somewhat linear and on a timeline, so it's not as easily possible to enjoy. Not to mention the labyrinthian layout of Shapier. Tarna is a nice place, but the alteration to the overworld and how it functions detracted from my experience with the game in these specific terms. Mordavia is the closest to capturing the feeling of Spielberg for me, but in the way that it is so desolate and forgotten, if you will, affects my perception of it. Silmaria is a nice mixture of the various factors, and perhaps it's a good one to qualify, but I always found myself yearning for Spielberg. But enough about that for the moment. Back to the game. If you dawdle around outside of town too long, you may find that night falls upon Spielberg. Quest for Glory has an in-game timer, and when you stay at an inn, or rest otherwise on the overworld, time passes in various increments. You can always check about what time it is through your menu. I say about what time it is because the game doesn't give you a specific number, and I really like this. The hero would not have had a watch to know that it's exactly 8:22 p.m., so I think it's a cool idea to say that it's just past noon, or the middle of the night. The addition of a day and night cycle is another element that drew me further into this series. In King's Quest, for example, it's always day and only night if the developers determined it would be after a certain point or for story sequences. Now, to its credit, King's Quest IV had a sort of day and night cycle, but not exactly the same as Quest for Glory in that time passes regardless of your decisions at a fixed rate. Either way, this presents a problem because the town gates close at sundown and will not be open until sunrise. If you have the climbing skill, you can scale the front gate and hop into town. But if you don't have it, you're plumb out of luck, and you're going to have to sleep in the woods or on the road. But be careful. Life outside the walls can be dangerous. After scaling the wall, there's little to do in Spielberg at night, so the hero can head to the Hero's Tale Inn to get a good night's sleep. This inn is run by a pair of catas, Shamin and Shima. Notably, they are a cat-like race from the southern deserts, a far-off city by the name of Shapier. The hero can just rent a room for the night, or if he likes, he can sit down by the other man and enjoy food and drink brought by Shima. If you decide to sit down, you'll find the man sitting with his head on the table is Abdullah Du, and it would seem that he's had a bad run of luck. Apparently, he hails from the aforementioned Shapier and is a merchant. While loaded down with goods, he hoped to be the first merchant into the valley this year, but instead, he was caught by the band of brigands, including a minotaur apparently, and barely escaped with his life. We can buy Abdullah dinner, which he appreciates, and allow him to talk his head off as he has an awful lot to say, akin to most other characters in the game. Once the hero has had his fill, he can head off to his room and get rested up for the next day. There are only a handful of safe places to sleep through the night in Quest for Glory, and this is one of them. We will cover some of the others as we continue into the game. The village of Spielberg exists within a valley, and the areas surrounding the town are traversable forest and extend several screens in any given direction. Some of these screens are simply forest the hero must pass through in order to get to certain locations, and others are points of interest with unique events, characters, or items. Now that we've spent the first day getting accustomed to Spielberg and what it has to offer, it's time to venture forth into the forest and see what interesting things we can find. One such place the hero can find is the graveyard. This is directly west of town, though you can only enter from the south or west of the graveyard itself. During the day, this place isn't too bad, but at night it can get a little spooky and deadly. Adventurers coming here for any reason best be prepared if they risk a nighttime visit. There are various such areas to discover, some of which are dangerous and others which are quite safe. Regardless, exploration is often rewarded in Quest for Glory. However, when exploring the wilderness, it's possible that the hero will encounter an enemy, at which point hostile intent becomes evident, and combat will ensue. It's silly, but this is one of my favorite lines from Quest for Glory. I haven't spoken about combat much at all, other than the related skills and that it exists, so let's explore that a little further. As mentioned, when the hero is wandering around the woods or overworld in general, aside from safe zones, there is a chance that an enemy will spawn on screen and come towards you. If you collide with their model, a battle is initiated and the player is taken to a separate screen in which the encounter occurs. On the top left, your health, stamina, and mana will be displayed. On the top right will be the enemy's HP bar, and in the bottom right corner is your action menu. The action menu features 4 actions: slash, stab, dodge, and parry. We can use the mouse to click these commands or the keyboard to perform the same functions. I like using the keyboard in the EGA version and in the VGA remake of 2, but in the VGA Quest for Glory, I prefer using the mouse to enter the commands. On top of those actions, if you have magic, you can press the center star icon, and that will swap out your commands for some of the spells that are usable in combat, presuming you have them. I've seen some complain about the combat in this game, but I think for what it is and what it's trying to do, it's pretty good. Honestly, I like the combat in these games less and less as the series goes on. The combat in the 3rd and 4th game are downright awful as far as I'm concerned, but I rather enjoyed in the first 2 games. Something about the changes they made to the system did not jive with me, but we'll go over those when we get to that point. During the day, you may encounter sauruses, goblins, and other such creatures. Be wary of traveling at night as the stronger creatures come out to play, such as cheetars. One of the best feelings in this game is getting stronger through doing, and feeling that translate to your ability to dispatch enemies in combat. Whereas a goblin may prove a decent challenge to an untrained character, after playing through the game and building up your hero, you'll find that you can take on a whole legion of them by the end of the game, and it feels great. While you are able to avoid many combat scenarios, it is still something that's bound to happen in Quest for Glory titles from time to time. Another location we can find somewhat close to town is the archery range. This area is just south of what would be the town center thereabouts. To the east and south we can find both a waterfall and a lake. The area with the waterfall has a mysterious-looking ledge upon it, and almost what looks to be a door on the ledge. We'll have to investigate that later. Having explored quite enough for the time being, we can head back to town and enjoy the tavern for the afternoon. Heading inside the tavern, it's not the most well-kept place the hero has been to. There's at least one patron lost in his drink, and what looks like 2 local shopkeepers playing some sort of game at one of the tables. The bartender wanders back and forth, waiting for a customer, and the corner closest to the door houses what looks like a relative of Otto von Goon standing above what appears to be a trap door. Upon entering the tavern for the first time, the hero might observe a small piece of crumpled paper on the floor by one of the stools. If you take the time to read it, it seems to be some sort of message to someone named B. It speaks of someone becoming suspicious, and that they need to hold off on their meetings for a bit, but they will continue to communicate through the notes. Certainly an interesting and suspicious tidbit. If you decide to sit down at the barkeeper has a few options in terms of drinks. Ale is relatively cheap at 1 silver. You can buy the Troll Sweat for 5 silver, and then a whopping 25 silver for the Dragon's Breath Brew. Choose wisely if you decide to partake. One thing Quest for Glory as a series does not shy away from is the opportunity to kill the player character. Be sure to save frequently, and with multiple saves ideally. You're going to be hitting that restore button from time to time depending on what actions you take. The series is even a bit famous for its death screens that can be a bit cheeky. After enjoying a bit of ale and piddling around the tavern, the hero finds he has a bit more daylight left, so it's back out to the forest feeling refreshed to see what other interesting areas can be found. This time we're headed directly north of the town. It's here that we can find Irana's Garden. Irana's Garden is a recurring location in each game. There's always one screen somewhere that's been protected and enchanted by a long-gone wizard named Irana. These are always safe places to sleep, and often feature rejuvenating fruit or other such goodies for traveling heroes. What really stands out about the garden is how it's completely covered with a blanket of fresh flowers, and everything seems to be in bloom, despite the harsh winter surrounding the valley. Outside of the flora, what appears to be almost a sort of stone grave seems to be a prominent feature in the garden. Certain character classes can benefit from interacting with this stone, but it requires a certain action to be performed. The hero is able to enjoy the refreshing fruit from the tree and can also pick some of the beautiful flowers growing here. Heading yet further east from the garden, there exists a cave with a troll guarding the exterior. You can get into direct combat with this troll, but unless you're fairly well trained, he's a pretty daunting opponent and is likely best to be avoided early on. Inside the cave, there is a bear chained to a stake. He rears up, ready to attack if the hero comes too close. For now, there's not much that can be done, but it's certainly a place worth keeping note of. Having spent the rest of the available hours, it's time to head back towards Spielberg. Taking a walk around the town at night before heading to the inn, the hero may observe what appears to be a flashing light emanating from the alleyway. If you decide to investigate this light, you'll find out you've been lured into a trap by 2 bandits. If you aren't willing to hand over your hard-earned coin, expect to be shanked. However, if the hero is a thief, they have the ability to make the well-known thief sign, which will deter the would-be robbers. Further, they'll let you in on a little secret. The password that the goon, whose name is appropriately revealed as Crusher, inside of the tavern is expecting to hear if you talk to him is Swordfish. Password in hand, the hero can head into the tavern and try it out. Speaking the password to Crusher will cause him to move out of the way, allowing us to take the trap door down to the room below the tavern. Down here, as it turns out, is the Thieves Guild. Apparently, we have to pay to be a part of this fine establishment, an entry fee of 25 silver coins to receive our license. The hero has but to pay Boris over at the bar door for the pleasure of joining the guild. This opens a few options to us, including a gambling minigame called Dagnabbit. This game allows the hero to wager up to 50 silver coins in a game against the chief thief. The game features 3 rounds. Each round consists of each player throwing 3 daggers at a scoreboard. The closer to the bullseye you get, the more points you receive for the throw. Whoever has the most points at the end of the 3 rounds is the winner. Once you figure out the game, it's a great way to stack up quite a lot of cash pretty quickly and easily. I think it's one of the better minigames in the series, and I almost always engage in a few games of Dagnabbit. Not to mention, if you figure the game out and become effective at it, you can print as much money as you need, since the chief thief has bottomless pockets with which to wager against you. Suit of chainmail, here I come. Other than the minigame, we can also speak with Boris, and he has a thief toolkit for sale. While you may start with a basic lockpick if you are the thief class, the Thieves Toolkit is a superior tool that will increase the likelihood of picking locks successfully, though it does have one major downside, which we'll get to in just a moment. Alternatively, if the hero has something hot to sell, Boris will always take it off of your hands as he's the guild fence. There are various locations which the hero can break into if he is so inclined, so any treasures found within can be returned here for some good payout. We will certainly be paying visits to such locations in due time. One final thing to consider while wandering around the guild is where you stand. Don't just stand anywhere, especially in front of the chief while he's casually throwing daggers at the board, or you might find yourself the target instead. If your hero did pick up the Thieves Toolkit from Boris, being that it's nighttime, you're welcome to test it out on some of the nearby houses. Only a few can be broken into, but they're good fun. Don't worry, we will visit some of these homes and do just that, but much later on. The house immediately next to the tavern is abandoned, and while you can't physically go inside, you can practice your skill on the door. The aforementioned downside to the toolkit is that you can no longer attempt to pick your nose as you can with the single lockpick. Though, don't stick it too far up in there. Once a new day dawns, the hero can embark on more quests. There's going to be a certain potion the hero needs to brew at a later date, and there are various ingredients which will be needed that can be found around Spielberg. One of these ingredients is a magical seed. If you head to the northwestern area of the forest, you can find what appear to be 4 large plants playing a game of catch. They'll each in turn grab the seed out of the air and then toss it to another plant. There are at least 3 methods to get this seed, though perhaps more. The fighter can simply go full-on Ferngully and destroy the plant, taking the seed from the tattered remains. The agile thief can climb upon the rock and wait with his hands open to catch the seed, and the talented magic user can cast Fetch in order to grab it from the air. As I mentioned before, these choices aren't inherently locked to the class you picked. A thief or a fighter with the Fetch spell can still perform that resolution to the puzzle, and this is true for many such situations the player will encounter in Quest for Glory. Once you have the seed, the next item of interest on the list is a bundle of green meep fur. Meeps are 2-legged creatures that live underground, and if you head to the western portion of the forest, a group of them can be found popping up from beneath several rocks. The hero can talk to these meeps and discover more about the forest, though these guys are kind of silly and don't offer a lot of serious information. If you ask them about the fur, they'll happily hand over a footful of it. Further, if you ask them about magic, it turns out one of them found a scroll lying on the ground in the forest and freely offers it to the hero. The spell you receive is Detect Magic. Casting this in a given area will illuminate or highlight anything magically enchanted that's of interest and can be used to find hidden objects or other such things. How useful! Near the Meep alcove, there's a fairy circle of mushrooms within what appears to be a stone circle or henge. While we can't accomplish everything we need to here during the day, we can take a few mushrooms for ourselves to either sell or ingest. Ingesting the mushrooms sends you on quite the visual trip, but it's best not to eat too many, and the game, unlike real life, even warns you when you get a little too close. South of the Stonehenge, there may be a white stag eating peacefully from the forest floor. Upon coming closer, the stag will flee to the west, and if the hero follows the stag, he will find his way into a very special corner of the forest. If you approach the stag yet again, while in this corner of the forest, a dryad will suddenly appear from the tree and ask if you are one with the woods. Considering we just ate a pile of random mushrooms that we found and are friendly with the meeps, I'd say we certainly are. Of course, let's just forget about the Ferngully thing for this moment. The Dryad explains that she desperately needs a seed from the spore-spitting plants called Spirea of the North, as she wants to plant it elsewhere in an effort to preserve the rare and magical plant. Fortunately for the Dryad, we've picked up just such a seed earlier this morning. Placing it into the space between the Dryad and the tree, the Dryad explains that the seed will boldly grow where none have grown before enlightening us with some sort of foretold prophecy. Apparently, the evil residing in the valleys perverts the ways of nature, and the prophecy states that a hero will bring a young human from out of the darkness. This is when you formally learn of the Dispel potion that I spoke about earlier, and she gives us a recipe, or at least recaps the ingredients needed. Flowers from Irana's garden, fairy dust, green fur, a magic acorn, and flying water. After explaining this, she says that she must go and wishes us good luck in our quest. As she folds back into the tree, an acorn falls to the ground, granting us one of the components for the Dispel potion, adding to what the hero already has. Since we already have flowers from the garden, green fur, and a magic acorn, that only leaves a couple of items: flying water and fairy dust. If we head back to the waterfall that we saw earlier, the hero can use a flask to capture some of the water coming out of the waterfall. This is your flying water. Clever. While here, the hero can use the new spell he acquired from the Meeps, Detect Magic. Casting the spell reveals a secret and enchanted ladder upon the cliff wall. Now that the hero knows it's there, he can scale the side of the cliff and investigate that curious door-shaped rock. Be careful that you're out of the way when you knock on the door, because the occupant opens the door pretty quickly and with zeal. If you manage to stand out of the way of the door when it swings wide open, the inhabitant offers for the hero to come inside. This is Enri the Eighth, the Hermit, whose father was an hermit, and mother was an hermit, and his father's father was an hermit, and so on. He's a rather friendly, if lonely fellow. But that's the life of an hermit, I suppose. This is another one of the safe places for the hero to sleep overnight, but Henry always asks for an exchange of 1 ration if the hero wants to sleep there, and the hero is further subjected to a late night of cribbage. He will also reveal that the latter is enchanted via a spell that he learned from the wizard Erasmus. He further reveals that he has another spell he likes to use called Trigger. If you ask further about the Trigger spell, he'll offer it to you for free. Heading outside, the hero can now test the Trigger spell on the ladder, and instead of merely revealing the existence of the ladder as Detect Magic does, Trigger causes the ladder to be permanently visible, or at least until the hero leaves the screen. So these are similar spells, but with different effects. Heading back towards town, the hero can visit the healer now that he's learned the information about the Dispel potion from the Dryad. The hero will explain that he visited the Dryad and that she gave him a magic acorn as well as the formula for the Dispel potion. The healer replies that she'll be able to brew it if you are able to bring her all of the related ingredients. At this point, you're welcome to hand over some of the exotic ingredients. If you do, she'll make a note of which ingredients are still needed for the Dispel potion in order to help keep the hero on track. Heading back out, from time to time when passing by the town gates, the hero can encounter a shady-looking fellow tossing a dagger by the entrance. His name is Bruno, and he's willing to sell the hero some information if he's willing to part with some of his silver. We can learn about Baba Yaga, monsters, and other such information, though sometimes he asks for more money for further details. It's up to the player to determine whether or not the information is worth the money, but he can reveal some solid tips. Thinking back to the cave featuring the fearsome bear, the hero decides to return and see what can be done. Being that my hero is a hybrid character, after sneaking past the troll, he casts the calm spell on the bear. This keeps the bear relaxed, and he won't rear up to attack you while he's calmed, and can be safely passed to delve further into the cave. Again, this is merely one of the multiple options that can be deployed to circumvent this particular issue. Upon entering the depths of the cave, a kobold can be observed to be sleeping on a rock formation, and he wears what appears to be a large golden key. Otherwise, there are a few mushrooms on the table, as well as a small treasure trove. As with most situations, there are multiple solutions to this problem. Fighters can engage, magic users can fetch, and the thief, or any character skilled in stealth really, can sneak up and swipe the key while the kobold still sleeps. Keep in mind that if your stealth skill is too low, you'll probably alert the kobold, and hostile intent will become evident, causing a fight. Key in hand, one way or another, we can head back to the front of the cave and calm the bear once more, and attempt to use the key on his chains to see if there's any result. Shockingly, removing the chain causes an enchantment on the bear to end, and he rapidly morphs into a humanoid shape. It turns out this is the Baronet, Bernard von Spielberg. He explains, rather rudely, that he's happy to be free of the enchantment, and maybe his father will reward us if we were to visit the castle, after which he seems to disappear, as if by some magic. Recalling the notice on the quest board in the Adventurers Guild, the hero can head back towards the castle hoping for a modest reward for finding and returning the Baronet. Upon arriving at the castle, the gate guard explains that the Baron is awaiting your arrival and to head straight in. Approaching the doors, the guards flanking the entry door will play musical instruments, announcing your arrival before opening the door, allowing for entry. The Baron expresses his thanks and gratitude for saving his son, and explains that he has renewed hope that the curse upon the valley may yet be lifted. He further states that he expects that someday in the near future he envisions holding a ceremony in our honor and bestowing upon us the title Hero of Spielberg. At this point, you're forced to stay overnight in the castle and enjoy the festivities as well as dinner. Before this starts, you are able to speak at length with the Baron as well as the Baronet and discover any tidbits they may hold for you, particularly about the missing Baroness. Apparently, some years ago, the Baron tried to force the ogress, Baba Yaga, to leave the valley, and instead she placed a curse upon the valley that the Baron will lose everything he holds dear. Shortly thereafter, he lost his son and daughter, and began to lose the will to live, leaving his lands to wither as a lack of attention was paid. If you ask about his daughter, the Baron reveals that it's been 10 years since she was taken by Baba Yaga's magic, so the valley has been in dire straits for quite some time. Even further, the Baron's court jester named Yorick has also disappeared. Apparently he went looking for the Baroness, but never returned. He will then verbalize the full prophecy for us to hear. Comes a hero from the east, free the man from in the beast, bring the child from out the band, drive the curser from the land. Due to the fact you've come into the land from the east and have already freed the Baronet from his cursed beast form, the Baron believes you to be the hero of prophecy, though that remains to be determined. Whenever your thirst for knowledge is quenched, attempting to leave will cause the event to progress, and you'll be given control of the character outside of the castle the next day. Now that we know more about the main antagonist of the game, Baba Yaga, we can search the forest in order to find her lair. In the northwestern area of the forest, the hero can stumble upon it, and if he does, he'll find a spiked gate blocking access to what appears to be a hut on chicken legs. Approaching the gate causes one of the skulls attached to the fence to begin speaking. He explains that Baba Yaga is exceedingly dangerous, but if we're dumb enough to want to enter, then perhaps a deal can be made. One thing you absolutely need to do before working this deal out is ask the skull about the manner in which you can get the hut to sit down. The skull will tell you a rhyme that will cause the hut to sit down, and it goes like this. Hut of brown, now sit down. The reason you need to find this out now is because later on, Hero will not be able to speak with the skull, and it's possible to get stuck here. That aside, apparently the skull is very jealous of the other skulls along the fence. They all have fancy, bright, glowing eyes, and all he's good for is opening and closing the gate. He'd like the hero to find a gem or jewel that glows in the dark, though he doesn't offer any advice on where to retrieve it. Heading back into the forest, it's time for the hero to search around for more discoveries. Depending on how many days it's been and the time of day, the hero might stumble upon a meeting taking place by the archery range between Bruno, the intelligence salesman whom we met earlier outside of town, and another character. The hero can overhear the whole conversation, and by the sound of it they are planning to rob someone, but the hero's presence in the valley is making their target somewhat uneasy, so they are agreeing to back off for the time being. It's not very clear, especially on a first-time playthrough without prior knowledge, but if you listen to the conversation again after beating the game, it makes a lot more sense. More importantly, they speak about some sort of secret entrance where the bouncer hops around. Apparently, one of them holds a key to it, in fact. Not only that, but it seems as though the door is hidden with some rocks, and if you don't say a certain password, Hidengoseki, there is a guard named Fred inside that will attack you. Lots of good information can be had here, and once they conclude their conversation, Bruno walks off to the south, leaving only the other thief alone by the target board. Notably, this is the meeting which the note found in the tavern references, B being Bruno. As usual, there are a few solutions to this situation. The fighter can enter direct combat with the remaining thug, the magic user can cast an offensive magic spell upon him, and the thief can either throw rocks or a dagger at him from a distance. I prefer going the dagger route, but I always felt that this was an awkward sequence. This guy is straight up murdered by the hero, and I feel it's somewhat of an uncommon thing in the series. While he is a thief and a robber, something about this has always felt a little off in some way that I could never quite pinpoint. Either way, the end result is that he goes down and the hero is able to get the key. Though be careful, wandering the woods to the south of here, as sometimes Bruno will still be around, and if he finds you, he quickly tosses a dagger into your chest and there's little you can do about it. Once the hero retrieves the key, the hero can carry on with whatever he was doing at the time. We're going to go to the east of town to a completely snowed-over area that features a cave. Upon arrival, the mouth of the cave will open, and a frost giant, swinging a mighty axe, will exit and begin speaking with the hero. Apparently, this giant is mighty hungry and is willing to trade a precious gem he's carrying around, the jewel from Jotunheim, if the hero can sate his appetite. Through dialogue, we can discover that he's interested in fruit to mellow his mead horn. Though the giant states that effectively any fruit will do, apples are really the only fruit that can be had in any quantity near about Spielberg. In addition to that, he explicitly wants enough to fill his fists, so not just a couple of apples. Handing over 50 apples will be sufficient, and if that's done, he'll hand the hero the giant red gem and head back off to whence he came. An interesting side note about this character and interaction. In the original EGA release of this game, if the hero asks him about 3 different subjects, it will cause him to leave the area and never return, rendering the game unwinnable due to the inability to retrieve the gem from him. Gem in hand, the hero heads off to explore the forest south of the archery target and stumbles upon what surely must be the bouncer that hops around. It turns out they were referring to an Antwerp. These are semi-recurring creatures in the series. Notably, they are considered to be endangered. Behind him is pretty clearly what looks like a secret door, but we'll leave that alone for now. If you decide to continue east and south, there's a path that wraps around and heads into a small and rocky area. Entering this zone causes numerous brigands to appear from behind the rocks, all with arrows drawn. The best option is to turn around and keep this area in the back of your mind, but of course, you're welcome to give it a shot, so to speak. Heading out of the valley, it's time to meet with the fairies at their mushroom circle. Waiting around until nightfall, if the hero heads toward the mushroom circle, there will be many fairies observed swirling around the area. They'll ask you to dance with them, and the hero will oblige them with skilled footwork. After dancing for them, they will become somewhat enamored with the hero and begin taunting each other over possibly kissing the hero. You are able to speak with them on various topics, including fairy dust. Asking them about fairy dust will result in them offering to provide some, so long as you have an empty flask in which to receive it. But what hero worth his salt wouldn't have an empty flask to receive a mysterious substance at any given time? The next morning, the hero can head back to the healer as now he has all of the required ingredients for the Dispel potion. Handing over the final ingredients, the healer explains that it will take some time to brew the potion and that the hero should come back later. This is a good time to go ahead and buy the undead potion. This keeps spirits and other such creatures of the undead from immediately exerting their will upon you and killing you. Always a good thing to have on hand, though the potion itself doesn't last all that long. Coming back after a short time, the healer has crafted the Dispel potion successfully and we can pick that up. Now that we have all the items we need, it's time to approach this brigand fort we've both heard about and seen firsthand through the secret entrance that Bruno and his now murdered associate were discussing by the archery range. Walking toward the Antwerp will cause it to move out of the way, but be careful of getting too close to the Antwerp. If you attempt to attack the Antwerp, you can cause it to perform some sort of mega jump, the results of which will become apparent on the next screen you enter, as he will drop down upon you like a dragoon from Final Fantasy. Though there is a potential solution for this if you raise your sword in anticipation. Otherwise, it's going to result in a hero sandwich. After you fumble around with the secret door, don't forget to utter the passphrase, otherwise you'll encounter a fight with the reasonably strong troll, previously identified as Fred, on the other side. While he is beatable, it's much easier to simply utilize the passphrase in order to make it by without incident. Upon exiting the mountain pass, the hero will be further into the fort, beyond the archer-laden valley of earlier. Here lies a very large gate with a bell attached, as well as a minotaur guarding the entrance. Much like the troll, the minotaur can be fought, but if you're magically inclined, it can also be calmed to sleep, and the thief is able to stealthily climb over the gate and avoid detection. Oftentimes, I like to challenge the minotaur by this point in the game, just for that feeling of growth and satisfaction. Upon entering the fort, the hero will find that it is quite well fortified, with spikes and traps everywhere. This is a tricky screen because there are tripwires and pits to be found, as well as false bridges. This whole area is a bit of a trial and error zone in classic adventure game fashion, but once you figure it out, you'll be unlikely to forget it. If you look at the tripwires, the hero will not trip over them as he'll be aware of their presence. The other obstacles simply have to be avoided in order to progress to the door in the rear, but it's likely the first time here you'll be loading your game at least a couple of times before you make it through. The next room is even more difficult from a trial and error perspective, as there are several things that can be done which are the right thing to do, but doing them at the wrong moment results in your death. The first thing the hero must do is to close and lock the door behind him. Then he must block the door to the right with the chair. But you have to make sure the brigands can't see you from the southern door when you do so. If you do these two tasks successfully, 3 brigands that remarkably resemble the Three Stooges will appear from the leftmost door and begin walking towards you. You must wait until they are most of the way along the table before you topple the candelabra. Too soon will result in the hero's death. Once that is accomplished, they will turn around and begin to walk back around the table. Once they are far enough away, and only once they are far enough away, the hero can jump onto the table and grab the rope tying down the chandelier. He will then swing at them with a kick like Spider-Man, knocking the far left door closed with his foot to keep out the remaining brigands as the chandelier falls upon and disables the Three Stooges. Only then can the hero proceed through the rear door, further into the fort. This room is the focus of much negativity due to the strict way in which the sequence must happen. Many a hero have died in this spot, and if I had to guess which screen has the most reloads in the game, if that information could somehow be determined, I'd guarantee that it's this screen. I spent so long trying to get past it myself, but point-and-click adventure games are fairly famous for the trial and error aspect, so for me it's just par for the course. I don't mind it so long as it's not a constant problem. This is one of the later areas in the game with significantly higher stakes than most situations, so I think it's not unreasonable completely. This next room features a stark aesthetic change. It's more of a magical trick room, for lack of a better term. A figure wearing bright clothing sits in the middle of many walkways with a large orb above him. There are many entrances and exits in this room, as well as chains hanging from various locations. This turns out to be the wizard that is with the brigand group, and it's Yorick, the court jester that left the castle 10 years ago to find the Baroness. Through some speech, we can determine that he seems aware of the prophecy, and even wants us to release the child from the band, as he says. If you ask for more information, he will provide some. Apparently, after he left the castle, it took him 2 years to find her here, among the brigands, and he's posed as her warlock ever since that time. But he has been unable to break the spell that's been placed upon her. However, he didn't want to leave her to her fate here unminded, considering the company she was now keeping. He also reveals that the Minotaur is a friend of theirs as well, and his name is Toro. That in mind, hopefully he's not dead at this point, but that's the price of progress sometimes. Seemingly, Elsa, the Baroness, plans to uproot and take the band elsewhere once the snow clears, and Yorick fears that the curse will never be lifted if she's able to leave the valley, so time is of the essence. Despite all of this, he doesn't seem to want us to really proceed, and definitely doesn't offer any assistance with navigating his little maze. Once you open the final door, he even stands up and begins to point at the hero in what seems to me like an accusational sort of manner, though it's hard to say. Once you finally make it through the maze, the hero enters what appears to be a sort of treasure room with a hooded figure seated behind a desk, which seems to be the leader of the brigands. Upon approaching, the figure jumps over the desk and brandishes a sword in the hero's direction, preparing to attack. The hero must act quickly here, for too much delay and the brigand leader will run you through with the sword. Taking the freshly brewed Dispel potion from our backpack, the hero tosses it on the Brigand leader and a rapid transformation takes place, revealing a beautiful young woman. She seems to have been suffering from a sort of amnesia due to the curse and only now remembers who she was, the Baroness Elsa von Spielberg. She explains that she will be returning to the castle in short order to get help so that she can retrieve all of this treasure and return it to its rightful owners before the Brigands are able to leave with it. I'm sure Abdullah Du will be really pleased about this. Apparently, using her magical amulet to return to the castle, she leaves with Yorick and the hero is left standing in the treasure room alone. A really important thing to do here is pick up the magical mirror lying on the table. If you fail to pick this item up, you won't be able to achieve the real ending to the game. Rather, a lesser ending will be achieved. You can still export your character, which we'll talk about later, in either ending, but we're going for the real ending, so we pick up the magical mirror. There are also a couple of healing potions to be had on the table as well. While various items in the room yield interesting text boxes when examined, one in particular I'd like to focus on is the black bird statue resting up high on the left. The statement in the description reads, "That black bird looks strangely familiar. You sense that its destiny is irrevocably entwined with yours, in a strange foreshadowing of the rest of the Quest for Glory series." There is truth to this statement. The black bird, as we will find moving forward, is at bare minimum referenced in each of the following games. One thing to note is that this message is unique to the VGA edition of Quest for Glory. The EGA version offers a much simpler message with much less foreboding. This is likely because Quest for Glory 2 was already out in 1990 by the time the VGA remake was released in 1992. In fact, the VGA version of the first Quest for Glory released only a month before Quest for Glory 3 released, so they had a better idea of some themes that would recur in the series by that point, and therefore had retconned a few things when re-releasing the game. Another notable mention is that the Persian carpet has a license plate. Yes, a license plate reading Abdullah Du 222. After examining some of the items, it's time to sneak out the back, and this allows the hero to escape to the same secret entrance he entered from. At this point, we have everything we need in order to revisit Baba Yaga and see what can be done about that evil witch, as heading toward the castle now will trigger the bad ending. But before we head to Baba Yaga's hut, let's take a quick diversion to Erasmus's castle, which is located on the eastern side of the woods near the frost cave that the giant inhabited. Stepping onto the first screen, you can see what appears to be a large stone walkway, twisting and winding as far as the eye can see, leading up to a large mountain capped with a gigantic, phallic-shaped purple castle. The hero takes quite a few moments to make his way up the winding path, and upon arrival is met with a small golden gate, as well as a stone gargoyle. A small note is that this path is literally exhausting. You will drain stamina running up the path and can build stats doing this. Because it can drain stamina though, keep in mind that you can also die doing this. The gargoyle suddenly asks the hero a sequence of questions. Firstly, your name. These questions need to be answered honestly, or you'll find he teleports you back to the beginning of the long stone walkway. The first question is always about your name. The second and third questions can vary, but have specific answers that must be chosen, one of which includes a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference. If you successfully make it through the questionnaire, the gargoyle will allow the hero to access the castle. Inside the castle is all manner of curiosities, including what appears to be a statue or replica of Erasmus on the wall. Take your time to examine some of the trinkets to get an idea of what kind of place this is before heading further up the stairs, at which point the aforementioned statue will disappear and reappear upstairs to meet you. It was Erasmus all along. Along with Erasmus, a magical rat will also appear named Fenrus. This is his familiar or companion. If you're a magic user, Erasmus will immediately begin asking questions about your magical ability, and as to whether or not you have certain spells in your spellbook. Either way, you'll be given time to speak with Erasmus, and you can quiz him to your heart's content. It's at this time where you can learn about the magical mirror, which we seized from the Brigand encampment earlier. He's a bit of a touchy sort, though, and if you don't engage politely with his conversational efforts, he may just teleport you out of the castle and back to the beginning of the walkway. Alternatively, if you ever try to stand up, he also immediately teleports you out. Erasmus has no interest in being shanked, it would seem. One point of interest in the castle is the game of Mage's Maze. This is a minigame of sorts that the player can play with Erasmus. It's totally optional, and the reward is the Dazzle spell. One of the requirements to play is Trigger, so you have to have visited Enri the Hermit before taking part in this. The other required spells are Open, Flame Dart, and Fetch, which can all be purchased from Zara at the Magic Shop. If you decide to play the game, you'll be taken to a separate screen that shows a sort of course with various obstacles. The goal is to get your flame, which starts in the top left corner, to the bottom right corner where there is a landing. If you are able to make it first, you win. Erasmus will be controlling another flame that starts in the top right corner. The various obstacles in the course require the casting of certain spells, while the flame moves somewhat on its own accord. For example, if a boulder is blocking the way, the player must cast Open in order to remove the boulder. To make it across gaps, cast Fetch and bring a bridge over to the area you're trying to cross. To scale cliffs, Fetch must be used to bring a ladder. Trigger causes the flame to grow larger, smaller, and then back to a regular size. A large flame can consume a smaller flame, so that's the primary use of this. Otherwise, if your flame is too large, it won't be able to fit through certain areas. The final option is Flame Dart, which when cast, causes the flames on the board to be lured to the area which it was cast. Honestly, it's a pretty unintuitive game to play. But once you figure it out, it can be pretty fun, and make no mistake, it can be a little confusing to understand at first, but it's certainly the most developed of the minigames in Quest for Glory, so you want to be a hero. It is not a requirement for the hero to visit Erasmus at all, however. Doing so is completely optional for more of the world building and lore. That done, it's time to flip back to Baba Yaga and resolve this whole mess. Considering that we received the red gem from the frost giant in trade for some apples, we can now offer the red gem to the jealous skull on the fence. As soon as the hero approaches this screen, he'll be prompted by the skull asking for the gem and whether or not you retrieved one for him yet. Answering yes will cause the hero to place the gem into the skull. Once this is done, the skull rejoices and allows us entrance to the rear area. Now we can recite the ever so important rhyme mentioned earlier, Hut of Brown, now sit down, and the hut will come within access. Upon entering the ogress's hut, it has all manner of things in it. A cauldron, boiling some thick green goo, spiders and bats, and various alchemical items on the table. She immediately casts some sort of hex upon the hero and turns him into a frog, dangling him over the boiling pot. She decides that if the hero is willing to perform a certain task for her, that she will reconsider having him for dinner. Seemingly, she needs the root of a mandrake plant, which can be found in the graveyard. Notably, this sequence of events doesn't have to happen in this order. You don't need to wait until you have visited the fort and freed the Baroness. Giving the skull the gem, entering the hut, and collecting the mandrake root can all be done at effectively any time. Many of the sequences in this game are designed in such a way, another reason I absolutely love this first game in the series. Sending the hero out of the hut, though as a frog, she casts a spell from within the hut to return the hero to his true form. It's now up to the hero to complete his end of the bargain, to retrieve the root of a mandrake at exactly midnight. This is where the undead potion from before will come into play, so if you don't have it by this point, you need to pony up the silver to pick one up, because this task cannot be done without it. However, as a small detour while our hero awaits the stroke of midnight, it's time to delve into a little thieving in the evening. There are exactly 2 houses in the town which can be broken into, as the remaining houses are either empty or have their doors barred shut. Something to take note of is that if you plan to enter one of these buildings, make certain that you do get everything you want on the first night. Subsequent nights, the hero will find that the doors are barred from the inside after the first break-in. The first house we're going to look at is the Granny's house. She lives immediately next door to the magic shop and can often be seen in the day rocking in her chair on the porch. Inside is quite a nice and comfy living room of sorts, with a cat patrolling the area, seemingly a bird beneath the cover in its cage, a fireplace, and a few other areas of interest. There are several things an aspiring thief may attempt to take in here, from the candelabras upon the dresser, silver coins in the drawer, and the hero can even check between the folds of the couch for a little extra cash. There are some other surprises to be found in here if you mess with a little too much, but I'll leave that for you to find out on your own journey, as I can't bring myself to spoil all the surprises. Next up is the house immediately to the left of the dry goods shop. This one is definitely a step up in terms of wealth. For starters, there's a second story in the home and a much more expensive looking fireplace, including a mounted creature above it. The hero need be careful here though, because this is the sheriff's house, and that is likely the last place you'd want to be caught trying to steal items. There is some leeway, but in fact you have to press your luck a bit to retrieve everything from this home. As before, there is a candelabra, a vase, and even a hidden safe that can be cracked if you have the skill to do so. All in all, it's a fun time to break into the houses and swipe a few valuables. This was always one of my favorite aspects of the Quest for Glory games, though none do thieving quite as well as this one in my opinion, which is a shame. The hero can then fence the stolen items to Boris in the Thieves Guild. But if you wait until this late in the game, you probably don't need the money, but it's still a fun task to engage in. Now it's time to head to the graveyard and get that root of Mandrake, though make sure you drink your potion. Once you drink the potion, you're free to travel within the graveyard without having to worry about the ghouls and other undead sucking the life out of you. So long as it's exactly midnight and the potion is consumed, the hero may freely walk over and grab the plant, securing the root. Nothing to it. Notable is the visible grate on the eastern side of the graveyard. Examining this allows us to hear noises coming from below. The speculation is that this connects to the Thieves Guild below the tavern, though why they would want a window to a haunted graveyard I'll never know. Now, back to Baba Yaga's hut. Upon entering the hut with the root, she turns the hero into a frog again, but realizes she needs to return the hero to his true form in order to retrieve the Mandrake root. She becomes quite excited upon receiving it and explains that it's the final ingredient she needed to make Mandrake mousse, which she alleges will be her greatest creation yet. After celebrating, she simply teleports the hero outside of the hut once again, staying true to her word that she would spare him if he would bring her the root. Unfortunately for Baba Yaga, that's not the end of our visit. It's time to head back inside, and of course, she's not exceedingly happy to see us return, seeming a bit bothered. This time, however, the hero wields the magical mirror he retrieved from the Brigand camp straight at Baba Yaga, just as she casts again the frog curse upon him. This time, Baba Yaga is transformed into a frog, and she's hopping mad. At this point, she panics, teleports the hero outside of the hut, and suddenly the chicken hut has sprouted its wings and takes off from the area, hopefully never to be seen again. At least, in Spielberg. Once the hero completes this task, they are automatically taken to the final screen of the game. A celebration in the Baron's castle. We can see the full cast of the game down to the fruit seller has arrived to celebrate the breaking of the curse upon the valley, as well as the exile of the evil ogress, Baba Yaga. News certainly does travel fast. Many of the folks who worked on the game are also represented here by custom sprites as a bit of an Easter egg, including Corey and Lori Cole. The hero can look at many of them to find out who they are. The Baron adorns the hero with a gigantic blue necklace with some manner of emblem upon it and declares that the hero has defeated the brigands and become the true hero of Spielberg. At this point, we get a detailed close-up of the hero as the prophecy is recited, now fulfilled. Enjoy this moment while it lasts, because it's the last time in the series that the hero wears his beautiful red cape. Alas, we barely knew ye. The next sequence we are treated to is the hero riding on Abdullah Du's magical carpet through the skies with the two katas that operated the inn, Shamin and Shima, presumably off to Shapier to return to the homeland of the katas, and Abdullah to see what trouble awaits them. At this point, you are also asked if you'd like to save your completed game for import in the future Quest for Glory titles. This is one feature I always enjoyed a lot about the Quest for Glory series. It makes it that much more personal to import a character through all of the games, even if the import process isn't always a perfect conversion. Regardless, you can complete the first game and each game in sequence, importing your character from the previous game each time, all the way to Quest for Glory 5, Dragonfire, and it feels good to do so. Another feature I always thought was very pleasant about this series is that each game has a general theme. For example, the first game has a sort of Germanic-style theme, and while not everything fits, for example Baba Yaga, it still makes sense as she arrived from another area and isn't native to the valley. The second game has more of an Arabian theme. The third, an African-style jungle landscape. The fourth features heavy Slavic inspiration, and the fifth and final game features heavy Greek inspiration. This gives each of the games its own feel and style in terms of design of buildings, the NPCs the game is populated with, and some general themes that may crop up within each title. Considering the goal of the game being that a man seeks to become a hero, it really does feel like he's traveled far and wide by the end of the series, visiting a variety of locations, peoples, and cultures, and truly earns the title. The world building only becomes better as the series carries on, standing on the shoulders of each game prior to it to create a wonderful sequence that is very memorable. Many features of this title, such as the aforementioned Black Bird, Erasmus, Irana's Garden, and much more were set to become staples of this long-running series, and this is what began most of it. I can't express how much I love this series of games, truly one of my favorites of all time, and I like to revisit them fairly often. The best part is that once you know the games well, they aren't exceedingly long time investments, and there's always the option of playing a class other than the one you played last time, providing a different perspective or different choices to keep things relatively fresh. While I tend to play certain classes more than others on subsequent replays, I have played through each game with each class at least once, including the Paladin class, which shows up later in the series. Don't worry, we'll talk about it when we get to it in the future. While there exist many point-and-click adventure games, there just aren't many quite like Quest for Glory. The closest product otherwise I can think of would be an indie game called Heroine's Quest from Crystal Shard. I've also made a video concerning Heroine's Quest and why you should play it. You can find it on my channel if you'd like to watch it. I would argue it's the most successful attempt at a spiritual successor to the Quest for Glory series, and even performs some functions better than Quest for Glory ever did. But that's completely subjective. Long story short, if you enjoy Quest for Glory games, I'd highly recommend to also check out Heroine's Quest. It's free on Steam, if you can believe that. I really hope you've enjoyed this dive into Quest for Glory, So You Want to Be a Hero. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and always brings me joy to return to Spielberg, and I hope you visit soon if you haven't yet. If you enjoyed the content of this video, please take the time to leave a like, as it helps my content become more pervasive and seen by more people. If you visited Spielberg, or even if you haven't, feel free to leave some details of your favorite moments below in the comments section. And, of course, you're welcome to subscribe to the channel in order to see more content like this, and much more. Subscribing lets me know that this kind of content is valued by viewers, and strongly encourages me to make more for your viewing pleasure. See you soon, when we journey to the mysterious land of Shapier and continue on our quest for glory.